Okay, let's talk about something we all kind of think we have a handle on. The role of women in ancient Egypt. You've seen the pictures, you've heard the stories, right? But the reality for the women who helped build one of history's greatest civilizations is, well, it's way more powerful and frankly, a lot more interesting than the stereotype.
Right, so let's tackle that stereotype head on, the one that probably jumps into your mind first. And it's an image that's shaped by some pretty powerful evidence, at least on the surface.
Ouch. I mean, that line comes from what they called a wisdom text, and trust me, it was chock full of stuff just like this. They consistently paint this picture of women as untrustworthy, gossipy, and just not capable of handling anything serious. This was basically the official narrative, written and taught by the men who held the pens.
And it's not just in the writing. You see it everywhere in their art. Now, this wasn't about who was actually taller. No, this was a totally deliberate choice. Showing the wife as the little woman, often at her husband's feet, was a clear visual code for her place in the social order. It was shorthand for she's less important.
So you see the quotes, you see the art, and you think, okay, case closed. But is that really the whole story? Because if we just stop there, we miss out on, well, pretty much everything. If you start digging into legal records, job titles, and temple archives, a completely different reality starts to emerge.
All right, let's peel back that first layer, the economy. Because contrary to that whole stuck-at-form idea, women were actually major, and I mean major, players in the Egyptian economy. And we are not talking about little side hustles here. I mean, think about it. Women were basically running the textile industry, and linen was one of Egypt's biggest exports. They were in charge of cosmetics and perfumes, a huge luxury market. And of course, baking and brewing. That's the stuff that literally fueled the entire workforce that built the pyramid.
And get this, these weren't just, informal gigs. No, we have actual records of women holding official titles that meant they had real authority. I mean, treasurer, overseer of the House of Weavers? These are serious management roles, controlling money, resources, and people. And speaking of that personal care industry, wow, it was a huge deal. The medical texts are filled with these wild recipes, not just for, a hippo fat baldness cream, but they even had a recipe actually titled, "To make the hair of a rival fall out." I mean, come on. This shows you it wasn't just about looking good. This was a sophisticated, high stakes, and very profitable industry.
Okay, so they had economic power, but what about influence over what people believed? Did they have a say in religion, the absolute core of their culture? Oh, you better believe it. Their role was critical. Yeah, inside those massive temples, women weren't just sitting in the back row. They were priestesses for some of the most powerful goddesses like Hathor. And get this, in the funeral rituals, which were a huge deal, two women would literally become the goddesses Isis and Nephthys, acting out this sacred play to make sure the dead person made it safely to the afterlife. How cool is that? And then, at the very, very top of the religious ladder, was a role so powerful it could rival the pharaoh himself. And it was always held by a woman, the divine wife of Amun. Seriously, this was no empty title. She controlled huge amounts of land, had her own administration. She was a political and economic force to be reckoned with. And if you want proof of their power, just listen to this. This is not someone asking nicely. This is a direct threat, a curse carved in stone, basically saying, disrespect my sacred space and you and your family will get sick. That is the language of someone who knows they have power and is not afraid to use it. All right, we've seen women with economic clout and massive religious authority. That brings us to the ultimate question, doesn't it? Could a woman hold the top job? Could a woman actually sit on the throne of Egypt and rule as pharaoh? The answer? A resounding absolute yes. And this wasn't some fluke that happened once when they ran out of men. No way. Female rulers pop up again and again, all throughout the thousands of years of Egyptian history, right from the very beginning. I mean, just take a look at this legacy. Way back in the very first dynasty, you've got Merit Neith, who was buried with all the honors of a king. Jump forward to the New Kingdom, and you have Hatshepsut, one of the most successful pharaohs, period. She ruled for over 2 decades and built some of the most incredible monuments we still see today. And then, of course, all the way at the end, the legend herself, Cleopatra, a brilliant naval commander who took on the might of Rome. So here's the kicker. While the official art was showing women as these little submissive figures,
The actual physical reality, like what they built and were buried in, told a completely different story, a story of massive power. I mean, the tomb of Queen Khentkaus was so huge that the first archaeologists who found it just assumed it had to belong to a man.
Okay, so what gives? How can you have both of these things at the same time? On one hand, you've got these nasty proverbs and art that puts women down. On the other hand, you have female pharaohs, powerful priestesses, and women running major industries. How do those two realities fit together?
The truth is, they both existed at the same time. Ancient Egypt wasn't one or the other. It was a paradox. It was a society where a woman could literally rule the entire country, but in art, she might still be shown as smaller than her husband. She could control the wealth of a god's temple, but also be the punchline in some scribe's misogynistic joke.
So the big idea here isn't about picking a side and saying, oh, the patriarchy view is wrong. It's that their world was a complex, messy mix of both. You had these really strong patriarchal rules, for sure, but you also had all these avenues for women to have incredible power and independence. The real story, the amazing story, is how these women navigated that contradictory world.
And you know, when you have to dig past the official story to find this much richer, more complex truth, it really gets you thinking. For centuries, the full story of Egyptian women was hidden because people only looked at the most obvious clues. It just begs the question, right? Whose stories are we still missing today? What other powerful histories are lying just beneath the surface of the simple narratives we all accept as true?